our industry, we're typically told to stick with larger MSAs that have a minimum population of 1 or 200,000, has had consistent growth in population, income, and jobs over the past 10 or more years, consistent rent growth, and more. The challenge is there are so many investors throwing money into those markets that cap rates have compressed to a point where it's becoming increasingly difficult to make the numbers work. Why not consider a path less traveled by the masses? This is exactly what George O'Brien did when he began investing just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. While the surrounding area may not be one of the first places that comes to mind to most people as an ideal place to build wealth in real estate investing, George has found tremendous success, including developing consistent deal flow, hitting double-digit cash-on-cash returns, and achieving support of community banks willing to bankroll his investments. You may not have massive appreciation at the end of the holding period in these markets, but you can receive solid cash flow. Welcome back to another episode. Today we have George O'Brien joining us from Greensburg, Pennsylvania. George, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So let's tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got started in real estate.
Well, like so many, it was accidental. Back in 2006, started my career at the YMCA in South Central PA. And, as everybody's been told as a kid, the best way to get financially free is to buy a house and you can pay it off. And so we bought a little bungalow, and I had a couple friends move in, and they were paying me, $400 a month. I'm like, well, this is great. And didn't really realize what I was doing at the time. And, fast forward a couple years, got married, and my wife and I really loved the place, but we knew we needed something bigger than that. So we bought a foreclosure in 2009 and fixed that up. But we really still had some attachment to the other place. The market obviously had changed, and we knew we weren't going to get what we put into the place, so we kept it as a rental. We thought it would always be nice, and it was paying in mortgage. And when tax time came around, I was like, whoa, look at this depreciation and everything else. So we really took a liking to it right away, and we had the opportunity to move out to Greensburg, which is about 3.5 hours away from South Central PA, Hanover area. And but we thought we were going to move back relatively quickly, so we kept that other place as the house we were going to move back into, and we moved back home. But we rented that out. Fast forward again a couple more years, and we finally said, well, you know what? I guess we're not moving back. And even if we did, the house would be too small. We're managing these places from 3.5 hours away. The cash flow is decent. Single family is never as good as multi. But we said that, let's start investing here in the area. And again, bought a foreclosure, fix it up ourselves because I'm fairly handy. And we turned around and had about $100,000 in equity and used that line of credit to buy 3 duplexes. And we did that, and we did it all by hand, and all by ourselves and with a few friends and a couple contractors, and we were producing extremely strong cash flow. And from there, then we had some banks that really liked our business model, and the rest is history. So kind of again by accident, and then just we got tired of we both had really strong W-2 jobs, both had graduate degrees, and it was just we'd sit there at the end of the month and going, how are we paying for this? And how are we paying for that? And, how are we going to pay for a renovated kitchen? And I said, instead of focusing on the pennies, let's focus on the dollars and, pinching pennies. And I said, let's try to find a way to generate income instead of cutting expenses.
Just recently, you've done something that I think a lot of our listeners may aspire to. You've essentially retired because of your real estate business. So, tell us about this feeling and how, basically you went about planning this whole process.
Yeah, so we bought our first duplex. Again, those 3 duplexes. We bought those in the spring of 2016. And again, we just continued to work and grind. And, I was doing a lot of work myself. Then I had a crew of guys, but, I was still running, getting materials. We had young children at the time. My wife was still working a W-2 job. I was working a W-2 job. So all in, we were 70, 80 hours a week, between the W-2 and the investments. But I had a goal in mind. We started our own property management company to make sure we were being compensated for managing not only our own assets, but assets we had with partners. And we turned around and knew how many units we needed in order to hire a full-time guy. And then we got to that point. We hired a full-time guy to run our operations. And then it was, okay, how many more do we need to supplement my income or replace my income? And then again, it wasn't just, we didn't want to just break even. It was like, okay, how do we continue to do this with replacing the income, but then also then to gaining more income? And we just started having the conversations. We got to that point about 2 years ago. And, I just felt that we were leaving a lot of opportunities go by the wayside because, it was important for me to be engaged with the kids and be engaged with my job. And we felt like we weren't really giving our property management company and also our portfolio the time that it needed to really truly grow. So we made a decision to move in a different direction, and it's been great. It's been relatively recent. It was in mid-August or mid-April, and and then the COVID, so we're home with the kids. So it's really, my wife was working upstairs in the bedroom, and I was taking care of the kids, and then we'd flip flop. So it's been about 3 or 4 weeks now. The kids have been back to daycare and camp, and I'm able to really dedicate a lot of my time to our brand and getting out there and talking to individuals like yourself and your listeners. We've had opportunity we've kept cultivating our relationships with some investors that we've met a couple months ago, and we continue to follow up with them. And we've had 2 of them out here this week already and interested in investing with us. We have a couple closings today. So we still work. You're still busy, but it's something at my schedule. And it's what I'm really passionate about, and I think it's going to pay for itself 2 times over. But by just being able to have dedicated time, focused time on that, and then when my children are home, then I can focus on just engaging them versus, well, I got to send a couple more emails and I got to do some other things related to the investment side of things. So it's been great so far.
One of the big things that you mentioned earlier was how a lot of the properties that you're investing in are strong cash flows. Now, I know that because I'm from the area, basically where you are, so I know that is a really strong cash flow market. So can you tell us a little bit about what you're seeing in the marketplace there, like the types of opportunities that are making sense?
Sure. It's everybody wants to have a 50-unit building or a 200-unit building and those sorts of things. And early on, I just didn't know much about syndication or any of those other things. So I knew what I knew. I focused on things that I could take down myself. And, we've seen strong results. If everybody follows the 1% rule, if you buy a place for $100,000, you need to at least get $1,000 in rent. And, that's good. And other people are saying 1.2, 1.5. We're seeing at least 2%. We're seeing you could buy a duplex here for $120,000 and it would be relatively turnkey, relatively livable. We're getting $850 a door. So you're looking at $1,700 and you might have a place that you bought for 120. It's really solid. Now, the nice thing is we have 150 units that we own, and it's not the largest building is 16 units. But it's less than a mile from the furthest one to the other side of town. And I can drive past every one of our assets in 15 minutes. So even though you don't have them all one parcel, you have them spread across a really nice little area, and it's, very, very strong cash flow. So, but we're still looking for, other larger deals. But again, those larger deals, everybody's looking for them, and they're tough to come by, and they're asking an arm and a leg for them. And so again, we're feeling that, even though it's smaller and it's not as ideal as something super big, because it's a lot more work with different closings and, different transactions, where the cash flow is significantly better than just a standalone building at this point. So that's been kind of the business model we've approached.
Are you finding a lot of competition in this space, in this niche?
Early on, no. Unfortunately, the city had a reputation for being really tough for investors. I never felt that way. I thought it was, they were being fair. They were, following the ordinances that, the council and the elected officials passed. And if you do right, and you do right by your tenants and you do right by the city, and you do things right the first time, you don't really have an issue. So there for a while, we didn't have much competition at all. We were buying things for $20,000 a door. And now there is just starting to see a little bit more competition, more in the redevelopment side of things and some of the retail spaces, commercial mixed use. But people are starting to get in now. Those same properties that we would have bought for $20,000 a door, you're now paying 40. But still, even at $40,000 a door, you're still getting close to 2% ratio there. So it's still really strong.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned as well that one of the things was a lot of these deals you were taking them down essentially yourself, but you also mentioned that you have met and you are meeting with some investors that want to invest with you. So what has been this transition like? Is it you're looking for capital to scale faster, or is it because perhaps that you've reached sort of like a ceiling with your own personal capacity that you can take on and that banks are willing to allow you to take on?
I think it's a little bit of both, so again, from spring of 16 until the fall of 17, everything we bought was ourselves, and again, we tapped out our line of credit, and we then would buy a place and refinance it and get a line and pay ourselves back, the Burr method, we continued to do that. And we didn't even know what the Burr method was at the time. But so we did that, but we got to the point where I found a 5-unit that came on the market. And, you don't typically see, some of these nice little 5 units, 10 units, 15, 20 units. They don't come on the market often, but when they did, I didn't have the capital to take it down. So, I've had a colleague of mine who was also a CEO of a YMCA locally, and he went in a different direction a few years prior. And we had a great relationship. We were looking maybe doing flips together, and just never materialized. So I reached out to him, and and we bought it together with another individual. And my realtor had asked me and some of my other friends, like, why would you form a partnership? And so, well, I'd rather have a percentage of something than 100% of nothing. Now you have to be careful. You have to make sure it's the right fit. And so from that first deal, then that same seller sold me a 16 unit, and I got that with my father. And then from there, I think we had 4 or 5 other deals. We created new LLCs. I have one with my brother-in-law, one with another friend of mine who I had worked with at the Y, who was on the board. So we've had really strong partnerships. A young man who works for me. He's our operations manager. He's 23 years old, and he now owns 5 units because, we are like-minded. We have a very similar philosophy on how we want our places to be and the type of properties we want to own and tenants we want to have placed. And so I'm like, let's go, get off the couch, analysis, paralysis by analysis. So we finally did that. So yeah, it's more about the relationship and be able to take more deals down. Just for example, we had 16 units under contract in my own name in March, and my wife and I are sitting and like, we can take all those down. However, our reserves would be pretty tight, and we want to make sure we keep reserves and our cash is still pretty liquid. So I said, well, let's give a 2-unit to, again, that the partner of mine, Ben. And then I formed a new partnership with a gentleman who I had been managing about 40 of his units. He wanted to get into the multifamily. He wanted to partner with me. So I passed those deals off to other partners. So I still have a piece of the deal. But the nice thing is too, I also still get the management of it because PPI is our property management company, Progressive Property Investments. So we're still then managing those assets, and I'm able to keep half of the cash that we were going to essentially use for those deals. We have a 10-unit today that we're purchasing with an investor from New York, who I met at a Rod Cleef event down in Baltimore boot camp, and him and I are in a development deal for 21 units. And again, we have the capital to take them down ourselves, but I'd rather bring in partners. So if we still have a piece of a deal and we still have capital, if we find something that we want to buy ourselves, we have those monies available.
Yeah, it allows you a lot, greater diversity as well. So yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Now, you mentioned as far as like property management, you guys are doing that yourself, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And that's for all of your portfolio that you have right now in PA?
Yep. So we have about 150 properties, our units that we own ourselves, and then another 60 that we manage for other investors. And this is our logo here, Progressive Property Investments. We did that because a lot of the investors that we have, or all the investors that we have, they had the capital, but they really don't have any experience, nor do they want to be a landlord. And so we figured, like, this is a good opportunity for us to start a business, start a brand, and manage our own assets. It creates a nice layer of liability coverage between the asset itself and the ownership group, and it also compensates us for the work that we're doing, because when you're getting a phone call on a Saturday, that the toilet's overflowing, that's a cost. There's an expense to that if we all come into the closing with the same amount of money, then who's the one that's going to be going and taking care of that toilet? So we formed a business to do that. Most of our assets are in need of some renovation. So I have a team of guys that go in and renovate those, and we get reimbursed for those improvements. So it works out really great, and we're starting to see a lot of value add to other investors. As I mentioned, we manage everything from Latrobe, Pennsylvania, down into Pittsburgh. So it's about 60-minute round trip if you start at one end and work to the other.
What kind of you mentioned renovations? What level of renovations are you finding seems to be pretty decent for the area?
Yeah, so early on it's cosmetic. We go in and new kitchens, new baths, new flooring. Nothing major. We make sure we go over the mechanicals, because the last thing you want to do is you make everything cosmetically great and you move a tenant in, and next thing you know they have a mechanical failure. So we really go in and make sure everything's buttoned up. We go in behind the scenes when nobody really sees. We go and put all brand new shutoffs in. We put all new electrical if it needs it. We get out in front of some of the capex with roofs and those sorts of things, because it's important. It's an asset, and we want people to be able to move in and be happy and pay on time. And when they go to move out, we don't have a major renovation to turn over. So right now, I'd say 95% of our turnovers are someone moves out on a Friday on July 31st. The other tenant can move in August 1st, and the very next day, because the place has really been kept up well and it was done the right way the first time. So cosmetic type things like that. We have a nice team of guys that can do roofs for us, or fencing. We see a lot of people who want fenced in yards because we do allow pets. So that's a value add that we do. And it's a couple bucks, but it adds some value to the property. Plus it makes us a lot more attractive than other places, because we have a fenced in yard and we allow pets. So that's from the smaller end. And then from a larger scope, we're going through an $800,000 renovation to a 21-unit mixed use building right now. We bought it for $149,000, and again, we'll have about $800,000 into it, but we'll have 19 units and also 2 retail out front.
Yeah, and some of the things you just mentioned, I mean, it definitely sounds like the area as well, especially the point of electrical and the fenced-in yards. I mean, I think, one of the biggest things that comes to mind was, I know like a lot of the houses that my family has purchased over the years in the area, like one of the biggest things was the electrical, just always outdated, high risk of electrical fires, because a lot of the houses in that area are just really kind of older, like the duplexes and everything. And then also, like you said, I do remember like having the fenced in property is like a really big selling point, because it seems as though so many people back there have dogs, everyone has dogs.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, what is it? 70% of America has some sort of pet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think less than 25% of landlords allow animals. So what we do is we allow, and it makes us a lot more marketable and attractive. So right now we have no vacancy, and we have a waiting list. We're smart about it. We put materials in the property that are pet friendly. You're not going to go and do an entire apartment in carpet. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So you're doing the LVTs, you're doing some of the sheet linoleum in smaller spaces like a bathroom. But we're finding tenants where our price point's a little bit higher than most. So we're getting those folks that really do take care of their animals. They have, they have a pet they take care of. They have a beautiful apartment they're paying a lot for. So when they leave and go to work, they're creating their animal, and they're not letting them run amok throughout the apartment.
Mm-hmm. What have been some of the biggest challenges or obstacles that you've faced during this entire experience?
Yeah, I mean, we've grown so fast, and we've used a lot of our personal resources for the properties. Cash is coming in and immediately going right out the door. My wife really strongly believed in what we were doing and had faith in me to do it. But we ran some credit cards up. We were paying contractors and credit cards, ones that allowed it, to paint or going to Lowe's or those sorts of things. So we were using a lot of credit. And early on, I wish I would have worked with investors a little bit more early on. I also wish we would have, instead of raising the money just for closing, also raise money for CapEx. And I think that's a really important piece because, for the 16 unit that I bought with my father, we had about $180,000 of our personal resources tied into that before we refinanced and then paid everybody back. But it's an important thing if you're going out there. Don't forget, you raise the money for the 20%, but really truly look at the capital you're going to need to get those places repositioned, and make sure you have it ahead of time, because you don't want to be pouring your resources into it or asking for a cash call with those investors after you've already closed.
I think that's a really poignant point that a lot of people, especially newer investors, tend to overlook. They just look at kind of the sticker price, if you will, of the property, and they say, I'm just going to raise this 20%, but then they forget about all of these other things. So if you don't mind, would you, let's just kind of look at some of those things, just as, especially for people that don't know. So let's kind of just touch in on this. So when you're talking about like the CapEx or anything above that 20%, let's say down payment or equity portion of the deal, let's look into that. So CapEx, and what else?
Yeah, no, I mean, the CapEx, look at vacancy. If you have a 16-unit building and your plan is to renovate it, well, you're not going to have it 100% occupied. So really be strategic about those sorts of things and look at timeline. How long is it going to take you to finish out, doing one of those units? Because if you're doing 4 at a time, now you're a 0.25%, you're only 75% occupied. And that's a really important piece. An example is my brother-in-law and I bought a place, and it was completely vacant, needed quite a bit of work. The bank put us on an aggressive loan repayment, so our mortgage payment was $800. And initially, when we first bought it, we didn't have anybody in there. And so then I'm taking, because we didn't raise CapEx, I'm personally paying that mortgage and also for the renovations upstairs. But once we got that done, so now you're, let's say, $15,000. So we have a few months where we're paying the mortgage, and you have $15,000 in flooring and cabinetries and appliances and paint and new ceiling fans, the things that you needed to get it market ready, rent ready. And then fine, that's great. And then we get it rented. And now I'm getting $900, but that's only paying the mortgage. It's not paying the taxes and the insurance and the snow removal and the utilities downstairs in the first floor. And not to mention, now I have $15,000 up here that we weren't reimbursed for just yet. Then we had to put $15,000 on the lower floor to get that one rent ready. And once we did, now we're getting $1,000 for that one. But it's now taken a while to get that $30,000 of renovations done in order to finish, to pay me back for those sorts of things. So it's a really important piece. Look at the occupancy and how you're going to cash flow during renovations.
And other things too that a lot of people do forget, things like closing costs and whatnot, especially if you have realtor fees or attorney fees and these things. One of the things too I was thinking, or I wanted to ask you, was with these deals that you did, it sounds as though that you had self-funded them up front, and then you would go and apply for the loan on the back end, right? After you've done the value add component to take your equity out.
Yeah, initially we did that, and that worked out well. As long as you have a relationship with the local bank, we have really strong relationship with 2 banks here in the region. The other thing we started doing, because we had such a strong success rate and the banks really liked what we were doing, is we would go and we'd purchase a property, and we'd also we get an appraisal as is, and we show them a pro forma as in current market, and then we do them a pro forma and rent roll of what it's going to be when it's repositioned. And so we essentially got 2 appraisals. It's a little bit more costly. Say a regular appraisal is $1,000, and as completed appraisal would be $1,500. But then they're telling you what the value of the property would be once the renovations are done, and you're getting the rents that you're projecting. But again, the nice thing is if you have a portfolio and a success, you can show the appraiser, here's the other rents I'm getting, here's some of my before and afters of the other places. Most of the appraisals in this area know us because they've seen so many of our, hey, George, see, it looks like you're getting another appraisal. Tell me about this. It's going to be like the other place. And you develop a relationship. So the nice thing is, the bank will give you an initial loan on the purchased 80/20, but then they'll have a line of credit sitting over here on the left for you to use as draws to make that renovation. So we've got to the point where we didn't necessarily have to fund it up front. They gave us a line of credit to draw from at any point that we wanted. Whether we're using it for that property or not, we might be using it on a property over here or a project over here, but it was sitting there tied for that building, for that opportunity. The larger 21 unit that I had mentioned just a few minutes ago of the investor from New York, we did a construction loan for that, where we got an appraisal once it's completed. The appraisal came in at 1.4 million, so we got qualified up for $1 million. So now we have to do a construction loan draws. So we have about $200,000 of equity into the deal, and then when we need money for supplies and windows and contractors for their final payment, we send a spreadsheet and those bills to the bank, and we get 2 draws a month. So that was the first time we've done that, and it's not as ideal as just being able to pull from a line of credit as you need, but for a bigger deal, that's one of the things you have to navigate through.
What kind of rates are you finding for our area there?
Yeah. So we're in the high 3s, low 4s, which is really strong for investment property, and it's not agency debt. It's all small local regional banks. I think the thing I would say to your listeners is this game is about relationships. It's a relationship with you, relationship with your property manager, relationship with the city, but also the banks. The banks are really critical. I send them Christmas cards. I send them, find out when their birthday is, send them those sorts of things, and develop a relationship and over communicate with them. When you get a testimony or you get some cool pictures, or a tenant just gives you praise, via email, forward it to them and just say, hey, thanks again. This is, you're part of this team, this part of the success, because it's really important. They'll go to bat for you, and they have the ability to move a lot quicker locally than, some of the larger agency debt.
That's actually a good point too, what you just mentioned, when you said like dealing with a lot of like the local lenders and whatnot, especially I think even for our area, like one of the biggest things that I found is really, it's kind of like the credit unions and whatnot. Like these are the folks that are willing to lend in our area, because our area is not like New York City or Los Angeles, so one of the big things, another thing I wanted to kind of just point out was it is a cash flow area. It's not really an appreciation area, right? So, I mean, it's quite interesting what it is that you're able to accomplish. So basically, you're picking up these properties significantly below value in order to be able to refi and take your money out.
Right. Yeah, we've seen some steady appreciation. You're not going to see the appreciation you'll see on the coastlines or some of the larger cities, but you're also not going to see the decline that you'll see in those areas. And you should never invest based on speculation of appreciation. It's always about cash flow. And and we have an investor out of New York, an investor out of DC, and they're well versed, and they're just like, I just don't know anywhere else that cash flow is like this. Now you just got to be careful. It's not like a booming metropolis here, and people look, one of the first things, some of the larger investors and educators out there will say, look at population growth, look at job growth. And in Western Pennsylvania and really in the Rust Belt to begin with, you just don't see a lot of that. But that's changing. Pittsburgh 10 years ago was not great. Pittsburgh today is fantastic. It's a great place to invest. There's a lot of tech here. There's a lot of things. So we're doing a better job of retaining our youth. We have all these universities here, and these kids were becoming educated and they're leaving. Now we're retaining them because there's more things to do. There's more breweries. There's more entertainment. There's more culture and music and tech. So we feel that we're ahead of what other people are going to eventually see in our little submarket of Pittsburgh. One thing that I forgot to mention when I talked about the banks, the local banks are happy to lend, but they want to have a relationship outside of just a loan. So our pledge has always been to the banks is whatever properties we have with you as far as a note, we'll create a checking account and savings account with you, and we'll collect all of our rents and security deposits, and the security deposits and reserves will be kept in the savings account, and then the rent income and all the expenses in and out will go into an operational checking account, and they love that. And so I would say to your folks, make sure you develop a relationship, but also understand they're going to want some sort of relationship outside of just being the lender.
What do they see the benefit of that? Just curious, like what do they see the benefit of that is?
because they can use that money to make more loans,
to make more loans,
money.
essentially.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Got it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
It makes it easier too. I have all of our accounts, all of our loans are set up for automatic payment. So they're all mapped to the same thing. If I have trash and expenses, they're tied to a certain asset. We have them mapped and they're being paid right out of there. My account loves it. I'm not paying out of one account for another. So everything's mapped. Everything's, all in nice one little pile for the account to take a look at. But yeah, the banks really, they pretty much request it at this point, especially in this market now.
Now, what piece of advice would you have for new people that are looking to get started?
I think the biggest thing is to educate yourself. Whether that's reading. I would have loved to have the time to sit and read books, but I just never did. With a W-2 job and 4 children and a wife who I love being around and we love being outside when it's nice out. And so I would literally listen to podcasts and I would follow people on Facebook and read. But I'd be out mowing the grass or pulling weeds or driving down the turnpike to visit family back home, and I'd listen to podcasts. I'd sit there and make some quick notes. I'd come back and put it in an Excel sheet to learn more about this. And, so educate yourself. But once you get to the point where you know enough, then take action. Make it happen. Don't just sit there and, I'll just wait. If you wait, you're gonna miss out on opportunities. And make sure you have surround yourself with people that are going to be supportive. People think of real estate or they think of landlords. Sometimes there's this negative connotation to that. Surround yourself with people that understand why you're trying to do it and they can be supportive. And if you have people that aren't supportive of it, just don't talk to them about real estate and, because they don't understand and that's unfortunate for them, but it's actually fortunate for you because there'll be more opportunities for you. So I'd say just make sure, educate yourself and then take action and surround yourself with people that understand why you're doing it and can be there to support you.
And how can our listeners get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out?
Sure. Yeah. My personal cell phone for anybody to call day or night is 724-875-4095. Be happy to talk to you about, their investment goals. If they're interested in working with us, that's great. If they're not, I'm here just to help. I did that early on. I had a mentor, a local gentleman who, had a few properties here, and we'd go out and have coffee every once in a while. And I really believe in giving back and helping. And I think that all comes back 10 times. Our website is progressivepropertyinvestments.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram, and anybody that can follow us. And we typically do food posts a week, and I try to do a live video once a week, just let everybody know kind of what we're working on, or different investors that are coming in town, and things I've experienced the prior weeks. So I'd love for people to follow us. You can give me a call. You can shoot me an email. My email address is contact PPI, Pennsylvania, Illinois, LLC. Contact PPI LLC at gmail.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much, George. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today.
Thank you for having me.